I'm with Susan Reid. We're talking about different things that her sister, Jerry Mock, did. Susan, you were just saying that she got to go around the world some more.
Yes.
Not only did she take a solo plane around the world and make a record, she did a number of things that set records, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
You want to tell us a little
She
bit?
set a straight line record. Um, she was in the air for 33 hours nonstop. And then another one, a speed record, where she flew to I think it was San Juan, Puerto Rico, and back nonstop. She was in the air 31 hours at that time, and set these records.
And this was at a time where what people were doing in the air was very important. Just to get the perspective again, she's doing this in the 1960s when there's a lot of tension going on around the world,
Yes.
and yet she has found a way to kind of pass over the tension and do things that are good for not just herself, but for our country.
Yes.
And she didn't seem to ever do any of this with the idea that she was just doing it for herself. She always had fun doing it too, didn't she?
That's why she wanted to do it.
So let's go back to her flight around the world.
Okay.
How did all this even start?
Well, it started with one evening in December of 1962 when she and Russ were having dinner, and she was,
Russ being her husband.
her husband Russ and were having dinner, and she complained about life is so boring, so predictable. She loved her family. She had 3 children, and she loved to cook, which is another thing. She took home ec in high school, and
Okay.
very disappointed she wasn't allowed to take industrial arts. But at that time, girls only could take home ec.
Well, there's that's a good, interesting
So
point.
things have improved. She's happy
Uh-huh.
to know that now.
Yeah.
So, but she was complaining to Russ that things should be more exciting, and he said, "Well, if you were so bored, why don't you just get in the plane and fly around the world?" And she said, "All right, I will."
And she was a pilot, but he was too, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That's a great story of how she got into this. I want to cover an item that's actually in the book that talks about, in the book we've been discussing, is her actual memoir of the event.
Yes.
And this is a second edition of her original book that was published in 1970. But Phoenix Graphics has put this one out as a
Yes.
second one so that we can share the story of what your sister did. I want to cover one item that I'm thinking about in this. Before she left, the night before, can you share the story of what her husband encountered as he was a trained pilot and he was looking at what was happening?
Well, while the plane was on the ground, thank God, he was just double checking all the controls, and when he revved up the engine, oil started pouring out of the oil filter.
Huh.
Now, they had put a brand new oil filter in the plane. Somebody had removed that and substituted a very old one that was ready to blow at any time. It was a God's sign that it happened while he was testing the plane on the ground, because if it had been in the air, she would have died. It took a lot of courage for her to go ahead and continue with that flight the next day.
So here's a lady who has planned for 2 years to do this event, methodically making sure everything's being taken care of. The night before, her husband, in just doing kind of a last minute check of things, discovered that something was wrong with that oil filter. Did she know that before she got in the plane?
Oh yes, she knew. She knew before the flight the next day.
Talk about a big life lesson. There are things that we have in life that we can plan for and go through all of the checklist. We can do everything right, and there may be people who are looking to undercut, to sabotage, in this a horrific activity.
Yes.
Did they ever find out what happened?
There was no proof, but there was another woman who was planning a flight around the world at the same time, and it has to be her friends.
But we don't know any of that, so
But-
nothing ever happened of that. So just before, and staying with this idea of a life lesson, we can go through our own checklist and think that we've covered everything, but we still need to trust and rely on those people very
That's
close
right.
to us
That's
who
right.
also care about us. And in this case, her husband found out the night before something that would have actually
Caused her death.
caused her death.
If it happened in the air, the plane would come down and she would die.
Important story. There's a whole bunch of lessons. I'm going to leave it at that one for this one.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, let's continue because we're on a roll. Let's pause it for a minute.